Good morning, everyone. My name's Simon Newman, Head of Cyber and Business Services for Police Crime Prevention Initiatives. Delighted to welcome you today to this webinar on cyber security for SMEs, titled Why Bother? Over the past 12 months with the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen cybersecurity take a renewed importance, with many SMEs starting to look at different ways of working and how they can improve their cyber hygiene. And today's webinar very much focuses around the importance of standards and compliance for SMEs. I'm delighted to be today joined by three experts in their field, which is being delivered today in partnership with Cyber Tec. First of all, delighted to welcome Robin Phillips. Robin is Cyber Tec's Customer Experiences Manager, who works with their reseller community. He's over 30 years experience within the IT industry, is a Prince 2 and Agile trained project manager, and has worked with the likes of IBM, Microsoft and Serco in both public and private sectors. Good morning, Robin.
Hi, good morning.
I'm also joined as well from Cyber Tec from Clive Madders. Clive is the CTO at Cyber Tec Security and also their chief assessor. He works directly with businesses as they go through the process of achieving cyber essentials, so very much understands where the common vulnerabilities lie for SMEs. He has over 25 years experience in the industry. He's seen it all and has built up an extensive repertoire delivering managed ICT services, cyber essential certifications and advanced security solutions to help improve the overall cybersecurity maturity of businesses across the UK. Welcome, Clive.
Good morning, Simon.
Thank you, Clive. And last but not least, of course, Michelle Credolfer from the Police Digital Security Centre. Michelle has been with PDSC for a number of years and supports our SME customers, helping raise awareness and the importance of cybersecurity among their organisations. Welcome, Michelle.
Morning, Simon.
Okay, straight into this morning's webinar, a really important question and perhaps one for Michelle to start with. We hear lots of people talk about compliance. Government talks about compliance, the industry talks about cybersecurity compliance. But what do we mean by it? What's your understanding of compliance in terms of cybersecurity?
So that's actually a good question. So the first thing I want to delve into is what do we actually mean by cybersecurity? In very simple terms, cybersecurity is looking at how organizations and individuals can reduce the vulnerability and risk of experiencing a cyber attack. It's about the application of technologies, processes, and controls to protect people, networks, devices, and data from cyber attacks and what steps need to be taken to achieve that. Now, compliance is all about following rules and meeting requirements, and that's not any different when we're looking at it from a cybersecurity perspective. So cybersecurity compliance involves creating and putting in place various risk-based controls to protect the accessibility, confidentiality, and security of information that is stored, processed, and transferred. And of course, it's important to understand that these cybersecurity standards and regulations vary depending on the location and industry an organization is in. But for example, with GDPR in 2018, it means that any organization that has data belonging to EU citizens need to comply with the regulations and put in place sufficient security protocols to protect and secure that information. And of course, if they fail to do so, they can face a very hefty fine, and that can actually be very devastating for some SMEs. So while many organizations have invested resources and time into complying with GDPR regulations, there's still a lack of focus on implementing proper cybersecurity guidelines across the entire business to protect and prevent from such a breach or attack. So the issue is still that some organizations underestimate the value of data they actually hold, and that cybercrime is really a serious threat they need to think about. So details about customers, contracts, even intellectual property have value to cybercriminals. And thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic, cybercrime has increased by 600%. And according to the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sports, cybersecurity breach survey of this year, 38 of all SMEs have already experienced cyber attacks in the last 12 months, of which 82% of them are phishing attacks. So there's still SMEs that are currently lacking the appropriate resources necessary to defend these attacks, which puts them at risk. So what can they actually do to reduce those chances of being a victim of cybercrime? Benchmarking your security controls against an established standard is a very good way of ensuring that you follow best practice, which is where Cyber Essentials and even our own digitally aware assessment scheme comes in very handy, to help them get on that cybersecurity journey and implement those very simple and easy controls that can protect them. But obviously, to achieve compliance, the most important thing for SMEs is to remember that cybersecurity is not just an issue that needs to be addressed by only their IT department. It's everyone within the organization needs to participate and comply with those controls in order to ensure that the whole system is secured. And then, of course, they need to understand their own digital risk, identify the types of digital data they hold, and where those vulnerabilities lie within the organization so that they can look at what controls need to be put in place to help them be secure. But it's also important to remember that being compliant also means to continuously monitor and review these controls, because the threat keeps evolving. Cyber criminals are finding new ways to breach in those networks, and it's important that businesses stay on top of that.
Fabulous, thanks, Michelle. There was a huge amount in there, and one of the things I think you said, which I was thinking of as you were talking there, was this is different to being perhaps an MOT for a car, where maybe you go through a test once a year and it gives you a clean bill of health for the next 12 months. Cybersecurity and compliance is about continuously checking to make sure that your standards are being met and that you've implemented the right controls. And it's not just about technology, but also about people as well, which is, I think, a really important part to get across. Thank you, Michelle. Robin, again, perhaps a question that leads on to this, really. In simple terms, why should SMEs care about cybersecurity, and why should it be factored into their budgets? And one of the questions I'm really keen to find out, really, is I often hear from SMEs who see cybersecurity as a cost as opposed to an investment. So really keen on your thoughts, Robin. What's your view on this?
Well, Simon, it's interesting that you draw the analogy for the MOT, because the analogy I would compare that to would in fact be car insurance. So, for instance, nobody wants to shell out on the large premium and the add-ons, etc., etc. And I'm sure we can all find, as IT managers and business owners, you can find budget for things which are right in front of you, which seem like an obvious benefit to the business. But cybersecurity is very much like insurance. It's there to prevent the fallout of the inevitable happening. So one of the things the NCSC always said, it's not when you have an attack. I mean, last year, 65,000 attacks per day were recorded in the SME community. So it's not a case of not in my street. This is going to happen to you at some point, whether that's internal, external, or the whole host of issues that could come about. So it's very much like insurance. If you don't have it and the inevitable happens, you're going to be in difficulty. The world that we live in, you mentioned the pandemic. Yes, we've been living in a very unusual business and social environment for the past 6-12 months. But that aside, there's never been more online transactions for both business and for on a personal basis. And you look at home working, the massive amount of home workers that are now out there. And I think this will continue for a very long time. I think it will create a trend where people realize that businesses realize that a distributed workforce is a good way of operating. But in doing so, that means there are more bring your own devices out there. There are more, essentially more threats. So we're used to having to, on our laptops, on our mobile devices, we're used to accessing work. We're used to being able to dial in and see what's in our inbox. We're used to be able to interact and react on some applications with businesses, but we're also used to booking our gym space or booking our coffee or, the list is literally immeasurable, and it's going to continue like that. And therefore, the threat, cybersecurity is about threat mitigation. So if you don't put in key controls, both in the workplace and in the, I use the home space is becoming the workspace, but just generally going about our business today, so much is online and the hackers are online. The risk to your business is online. And therefore, to secure that, to put in controls, to put in place that budget, you mentioned the word budget, the risk of not, I would say the issue is not, it should be included in the budget. What is the risk to not include it in the budget?
Brilliant. Thank you, Robin. That's really helpful. And I think, you know, as you say, there are a number of threats and challenges that are out there, and it's important that SMEs do take the opportunity to review, building on sort of Michelle's point there, the level of security they've got, the information they hold. Introducing Clive now, and a question for Clive, really. Robin highlighted there, you know, the impact of COVID-19, the fact that we've seen many businesses move to a much more online focused approach, and the increase of home workers in particular. Just really keen for your thoughts about how the past year has impacted the need for security improvements and risk mitigation, Clive.
Yes, indeed. I think it's quite an interesting one. And as Michelle mentioned, you know, people getting involved in the security is key. And as Robin said, many more devices now, home workers, and bring your own device. I think in the last kind of 12 months, 14 months or so, we were forced into a worldwide proof of concept of home working. And businesses who felt that they'd never be able to work from home were forced to do so. And subsequently have realised, as Robin rightly says, that this is possible. It's something that can be achieved, and therefore staff are now considering as well, do I really want to go back to the office full time? Do I want to stay at home, do 2 or 3 days a week? So over the last year, we've seen a number of risks and issues, I suppose, especially for businesses who've never considered home working, where there's now equipment at home that they don't have full control over. They don't control the network that their devices are connected to, because it's now in a home office or at home. There might be lots of other technologies on that same network, the children from school, and you know, or your partner's devices and all these kind of things. So risks really around how do you know what's connecting to your system. Early days of COVID, actually, we had a shortage of IT equipment. So I think lots of businesses decided the only way to work was to allow their users to work from home using whatever device they happen to have at home. So now we have lack of control of the device. We don't know what it is. Are we patching it? Is it up to date? What software is installed on it? Are there any vulnerabilities? The kind of issues that occur all the time with devices, but now much harder to control. And back to, as Michelle rightly said earlier, with people, and as Robin said, phishing increases and things like that. So where you used to get a phishing email in the office and you weren't sure about it, and you might turn to a colleague and go, have a look at this. Do you think this is okay? Now at home, you might be more inclined to click it. Also, because at home working now, you're more likely to be getting work requests by email, Teams, Zoom, and other things. There's a higher chance of you actually clicking through on something because you're expecting it now. And bad actors able to buy these kind of attacks and phishing attacks on the internet, on the dark web for very few pounds, can attack a company very easily. So this is all about control now, I think, and understanding how we control the environment that is now a bigger risk, because our network has increased perhaps from 1 or 2 locations to potentially hundreds of locations as our staff have all moved to home.
Crikey. Oh, it just goes to show, doesn't it, how a sudden change can result in opportunities for criminals. And I think I read somewhere that I think phishing attacks have gone up by somewhere in the region of about 400% over the past 12 months, as you say, because people are now working more online and are expecting emails, and perhaps have let their guard down a little bit due to the uncertainty of the situation they found themselves in. So certainly some really important things there, Clive. Back to Robin, and again, we talked about compliance and standards, and you know, you use the analogy of car car insurance there. I mean, why are certifications and standards so important, and what are the benefits to an SME? So this goes back to this point for me about SMEs viewing cybersecurity as a cost as opposed to an investment. So we ask about standards, we want them to get to a certain level, and we want them to achieve certification. Why, and what are those benefits?
Well, I think the benefits are many. I'd like to just sort of hit on some of the key ones. In my role, I work with a lot of value-added resellers, managed service providers who provide IT services directly into the SME community. And one of the things that comes up all the time is the conversation between the SME and the IT service provider when certification is brought to the table. And I think the key thing with certification is a benchmark. It's a standard, and without standards we can't measure. But let's come back to that. Let's say, well, why do we need certification? So quite often it'll be, well, we don't need certification because we've got malware, we've got this product, we've got that product, we've got another product, we've got someone who's full-time, looking at a screen and checking our, checking our infrastructure and such like. And all of that is great, and it is great, and I'm not going to say anything different. Yeah, you do need, and part of certification is to have these things in place. There's a number of certificates, whether it's NCSC, whether it's IASME, whether it's PDSC, whether it's BIS on the ISO program, all of which have value. And the other thing is, well, I've got this, why do I need that? Everything addresses a different area within the infrastructure of the business. So it depends very much what the risk is to your business. What sort of data do you hold? What clients do you have? What sector do you operate in? What level of integrity should you apply to data? So bring that back to, what does the SME get for certification? Well, it's not just a badge. People say, oh, it's just a badge of honor, isn't it? If I do this, I'll invest in this and I'll get this badge and that'll be wonderful. And then we can all forget about it. Well, absolutely no, you can't forget about it, because cybersecurity is something you look at every single day. So it's a holistic approach of standards, of product, of good basic practice. And certification essentially outlines a set of practices. But that means that your stakeholders in your business, your shareholders in your business, your employees within your business, and also your potential customers, and not only customers, supply chain as well. It's what you get is a common understood standard that has been, it's dependable, it's proven, it's referenceable, it's been ratified to the highest level by innumerable people and adopted across multiple areas. So it's not just you, it's not new, it's not a new thing. Certification tells your customers and everyone that you engage with that you have attained that standard. And I know in the public sector for a very, very long time, I know certainly the MOD and the NHS have always dictated, well, I don't think dictated is the right word, but they've encouraged all their suppliers to take cybersecurity certification, because like anything, it only takes one chain. You can have the strongest chain, but if one link is weak, that puts everything else at risk. So certification comes back to almost a duty of care to your own business, but also everybody that you do business with. And of course, from a certification perspective, it is a benchmark. It is a standard. Those standards can be obtained and then maintained, but can also be improved. And how can you improve if you don't have a standard? Where do you draw that line? What is the right thing to do? So I would encourage any SME to look at the host of cybersecurity certifications which are available to them today.
Fabulous. That's brilliant. Thank you, Robin. And I think one thing you said there, which really hits home, is, and I wrote this down separately here, is this point about a duty of care to customers, to their staff, suppliers, and so it's really important. Clive, question I want to sort of bring you in on here, and particularly as your role as a CTO and a chief assessor, and of course, Cyber Tec themselves, you're an SME, and much in the same way as the PDSC is as well. One of the things I hear a lot from SMEs is that they've outsourced a lot of their cybersecurity, if you like, to a provider, a managed service provider or a cloud service provider in many ways. And some of the larger ones may well have their own IT departments who deal with all of this. And so one of the questions we often get back is, well, why should it bother me? Someone else takes care of this. The IT department deal with this. Our managed service provider deals with this. How do you answer that? How do you deal with that question?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and we hear that quite a lot as well. I mean, I think the first thing is you can't really completely outsource your involvement in your IT security. So you need to have ownership of that, and many of the standards will be requiring you as well to checks and balances against your suppliers to make sure that things are in place. But I think the biggest thing I find really is the mindset is different. So an IT person who is a support professional will be looking to provide you with access to your data and easy access to make your working life nice and easy. You can access whatever you need, whenever you need it, from wherever you need it. And their mindset is very much about that and making sure that you can access things. The security professional, however, whilst not wanting to prevent you working effectively, is thinking more about not only your access to that data, but somebody else's access should you be compromised. And how do we protect that? How do we make it safe? And what can we do to systems to ensure that they are safe and secure? So I think the first thing there really, Simon, is the different mindsets between the two types of professional, whether it's IT support or security professionals. So I think that's the main thing. And from a security perspective, it's about restricting access, making sure it's safe and secure. And from an IT perspective, it's about providing access and making things easy to use. So I think that's the key difference.
Fabulous. Really helpful, Clive. Thank you. And now bringing Michelle back in, and a question perhaps for all of you to answer. Lots and lots of discussion and debate. I think Robin just sort of highlighted some of that around government. But, will national standards become mandatory? We're starting to see some countries, perhaps the US, for example, take a more favourable look towards greater regulatory control of certain standards around cybersecurity. And I guess, Michelle, perhaps the first question back to you on this is, so, one, do you think that these standards will become mandatory for every organisation in the UK to follow? And secondly, how can SMEs actually start their cybersecurity journey? Where do they turn to? Who do they turn to achieve their cyber certifications?
Well, I think that we will definitely reach a point that it will become mandatory at some point, because it's important that we do, as cybersecurity should and is an integral part of every business. So whether they're a micro, small, medium, or large, everyone needs to participate and be cyber compliant so that we can better protect everyone, for example, even within a supply chain from an attack. And I think Robin very clearly said we have a duty of care to do that. However, businesses shouldn't really wait until it's mandatory to follow those regulations. Matter of fact, businesses, as even Robin said, they can start now on their cybersecurity, no matter what sector, what size, or even how technically savvy they are. Because, for example, what we've done at the PDSC is, in collaboration with BSI, we've developed a new assessment scheme called Digitally Aware and Digitally Resilient, which helps SMEs start their cybersecurity journey to help them reduce their vulnerability to cybercrime. So, for example, just looking at Digitally Aware, it's an entry-level certificate that is all about taking that first step within their cybersecurity journey, and it ensures that organization can build a strong cybersecurity foundation from within and encourages really good cyber practice throughout the business. And the beauty of it is that the assessment is based on the National Cybersecurity Center Small Business Guide. So it allows them to review their controls, helps them understand their cyber risk profile, and provides them useful recommendations that can be easily implemented to improve their response time, to ensure business continuity, and even reduce any loss or damage in case of a cyber breach or attack. So for some SMEs, this will be a stepping stone in their cybersecurity journey, which will lead and prepare them to go on to achieving higher levels of cyber certification, such as Cyber Essentials Plus, or even Digitally Resilient, which we really encourage for them to do, because cybersecurity journey is an essential part for any kind of business. And no matter where you are within that journey, there are assessment certifications out there that can help businesses, and it's a way to become more secured and help them reduce their own type of risk.
Brilliant. Thank you, Michelle. And I think the key thing I take away from that is that, one is that every organization needs to have those basic building blocks in place around security, irrespective of their size. But certainly for those micro and small businesses, they really need to think about some of those simple steps that will help them reduce their vulnerability to the overwhelming majority of cybercrime that we see. Same question again. I'm perhaps bringing Clive first. About cybersecurity journey and standards, and obviously Cyber Tec are a Cyber Essentials certification body, Clive. So just keen to hear your sort of thoughts around the journey and who do they turn to get those certifications.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my thing that I tend to say to clients all the time whenever I'm talking about cybersecurity and what they should think about is do something, don't do nothing. The key thing is you've got to think about your cybersecurity and kind of consider your risks. And these standards, as Michelle rightly says, are available. So we can start with the police one there into Cyber Essentials Plus. It is a journey. So for me, it's very much about starting with the basics, working your way through. And as you improve your cybersecurity, you kind of increase the certifications as you go. There are many organizations out there to help with that kind of journey. And as Robin said earlier, aligning to these standards means you are at least aligning what you're doing to a best practice that's been approved somewhere. So you know what you're doing is the right thing. And again, therefore, you're doing something and not nothing, which is the key thing for me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Clive. I like that. Do something rather than do nothing. Robin, last word on this. Just welcome your thoughts.
Well, I said, unless you measure, you cannot improve. And I completely agree with Clive's approach. It's about building blocks. It's not the boil the ocean, big bang approach. Let's get on the phone to someone and they will sort all our cybersecurity out. It's small steps. Start at the very, start at the desktop. Start at the device. Start ensuring that the controls that are in the different certifications, the PDSC, the Cyber Essentials, ISO, they're all at different levels for different types of organization. As Michelle mentioned, have a look. It's about risk. So, what does your business do? Who do you work with? What does it mean to you? Do you hold data? What would be, it's a bit, I think it was the Dr. Pepper advert. What is the worst thing that could happen? Well, what is the worst thing that could happen? You could have a data breach. You could be fined by the UK government for doing so. You could have massive reputational damage rather than financial damage. These are all the things. I know it sounds a bit scary, but I bring it down to, it's not, cyber threat is not about if it can happen. It's about when it will happen, and be prepared for when it will happen.
Brilliant. Thank you, Robin. So just rounding off today's webinar, I'd just be really interested if there's one line or one key takeaway from each of you that you'd like to share with the audience today in terms of compliance and broader cybersecurity issues. So back to Michelle. Michelle, very interested to hear your key takeaway from today's session.
I think what we've learned today is that compliance really affects everyone within an organization, and everyone needs to take that step to make sure everyone's secure, but to also not wait until it's mandatory to follow certain standards and certifications. And they're available for them to do that now. And it's better to act now and taking care of your cybersecurity and your business than when it's too late.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. That's great. Robin.
Cyber threat is here. It's now. Do something today, but you don't have to do it on your own. All you have to do is to, hit your search engine, and there are organizations out there who can help you at whatever level you deem your business to be right now. But do something.
Brilliant. That's really helpful. And last but not least, Clive, the last word from you.
Well, I think I'm back to my standard word there, Simon, which is do something, don't do nothing. You can start small. It's a nice, easy journey to take. Do something, don't do nothing.
Fabulous. Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more, Clive. I think that's fantastic. Well, thank you very much for everyone watching today. I'd just like to say a huge thank you once again to Michelle, to Robin, and to Clive for their expert views and opinions and thoughts on what is really quite a pressing issue. And as we see a growing problem for many SMEs to face. And I think, as Robin says there, it's a question of when, not if, you're going to be a victim of a cyber attack, and the importance really of just building those basic blocks in terms of reducing your vulnerability to some of those common types of cybercrime. So thank you once again. I hope everyone's enjoyed the session. I found it really interesting, really useful to hear those views, and we very much look forward to seeing you again soon in another webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.